up, beautiful ladies and handsome men? I am not sure what's true or false in this story. I take gossip, tea, rumor, and scandal from yesteryear, from online, from word of mouth, from books, and I ball it up and I tell you guys a story.
Yeah, in the sky, on the ground. Ride with a real one. Running the show with the gold is on me. Tell them haters that you on the go getting more real bossy. Now all your exes gon' call you again. Tell them stepping with a real man. Yeah.
Hey, I was breaking it down, baby. That is the new song by singer-songwriter K.O. called Holdin Me Down, featuring Young City. It drops on April 7, 2023, and I cannot wait, honey, which is why I've already pre-saved mine on Spotify. You guys can do the same thing by going and clicking on the top link in the description box and go ahead and click on it for y'all be riding with a fake one. Now, we're about to do Miss Betty LaVette. So first thing I want to say is either leave the room, because it's definitely going to be some disturbing stuff in this video, or put on your doggone helmet. She is a woman that's open, real, tells her story straight, no chaser. She also is a very talented woman that never got her due in the music industry. So I'm asking you that either right now or after this video, please go buy Miss Betty LaVette's recent album. If you cannot buy the album, buy a song, buy a book, buy something to support this lady. She absolutely deserves it. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's get into Miss Betty LaVette's very scandalous tea. Let's get to it. Betty Jo Haskins was born on January the 29th, 1946 in Muskegon, Michigan. Her mother's name was Perlina Johnson and her father's name was Frank Haskins. And on top of Betty, Perlina had a daughter named Maddie from a previous marriage. Now, Betty's young life was very much full of love. She and her sister Maddie were very close, and also her father adored her and felt like she could do no wrong. But her mother and father's relationship with each other would sometimes be a bit much. Every time they fought, especially if Frank had cheated, Perlina would go get in the family's car, crank it up, and just drive straight into a wall. And this might be absurd to you and me, but per gossip, that was like the only thing that could fix Perlina's relationship or mend her broken heart, was to get into the family car and drive it into the wall. So I guess we could say that although the family was loving and Perlina and Frank were in love, it was very dysfunctional. To get back to Betty, though, gossip claims that she was a showboat from the word go. The folks say that the very first time that she opened up her mouth to sing was when her parents were having a rent party. And Betty, little bitty 2-year-old tail, was really supposed to be in the bed. But her parents put on a record and Betty heard it from the back room. So she came in there singing the song and doing her little hips like this. All of the adults, including her parents, were drunk, so they started egging her on. And so this experience stuck with her, and this was one of the earliest times that she knew that she wanted to sing for a living. And singing was not all she wanted to do, because Betty was not your typical child. Her behavior would cause other kids her same age to blush, baby. I'm talking about full body just red. And by the time she and her family moved to Detroit, when I think Betty was probably around 10 or 11 years old, this kind of behavior was in full effect. Gossip claims that she was constantly telling her friends, I can't wait till I can be a grown person so I can smoke and drink and And yes, little Betty actually said the word. And not only was she telling her friends this, she was also telling some of her teachers this. And these were not regular teachers. Betty went to a Catholic school with nuns for teachers. Now, most nuns would try to stay away from this wild, wayward child, but there was this one nun who was actually the head nun, who decided it was her mission to put Betty on the straight and narrow. She tries to talk to Betty and tell her, you do not have to behave like this. You are a pretty young lady. Young ladies don't talk like that. They don't curse like sailors. And while she's doing this, Betty, of course, looking at her nails, popping her gum, you know, this just the way I am. Y'all gonna have to deal with it. But over time, the nun uses her superior patience to kind of wait Betty out. After a while, Betty's attitude had all but disappeared. She was talking better. She was being polite. And the nun truly showed everybody around her that all you have to do is have patience and take your time with these children that behave badly. So anyways, as these meetings with Betty and the nun continued, the nun finds out that Betty can sing and has a beautiful voice. And the nun thinks it's a great idea for Betty to perform in a talent show. And Betty is very proud that the nun has chosen her. So on the day of the talent show, Betty walks onto the stage with this beautiful dress on, looking like a little lady. She takes the mic and this fantastic voice comes out of her mouth. I am a hawk for you, baby. I can't get enough of your love. The head nun was about to have a heart attack. The students were all cutting up and laughing. And the priest was probably looking for a holy relic to throw upside Betty's head. And I am sure that the entire time that Betty was singing, she was looking the head nun dead in her face with a look like, I told you, B, I am who I am. And none of your little Catholic head nun stuff is going to change that. And so that meant that even though Betty was only around 12 years old and telling everybody who would listen that she was ready to she meant what she said. And per gossip, none of this behavior came from any sort of assault, trauma, or anything like that. She just was born a free spirit and she wanted to do everything at an early age. That's just who and what she was. By the time Betty was 14, she was pregnant with her first and I believe only child, a girl named Terry. Now she and Terry's father did end up getting married, but Betty found out that she wasn't wife material. She wanted to go out and have fun, but not only that, she wanted to pursue her singing career. And so at the age of 15, she divorced her husband and she left her daughter Terry with her mother and her sister and she took off on her own. But the only place she made it to was the doggone hospital. Her tail started doing too much way too soon and she had not healed completely from having her baby, and so she ended up very, very sick. And it was while she was in this hospital room that the first bit of scandalous tea went down. Now the folks say that Betty was in the hospital room with another young lady, probably very close to her age. And this other young lady had a boyfriend that would come and visit her constantly. Well, one day the other young lady had to leave the hospital room to go have tests. And baby, as soon as her behind was rolled out of the door, Betty pulled that doggone separation curtain back and gave a right pretty smile to that girl's boyfriend. And when she did, his scooped up skippy head got the cheesing right back and walked over to Betty to see what the smile was all about. Well, while they were talking, Betty found out that this guy was Willie Jones, a singer with the Royal Jokers. And honey, you know it's just a scandalous thing, child. Because next thing you know, that other girl was still laid up in the doggone hospital while Betty was riding riding 2 shows with her man. And at this point right here, this is where we leave the storytelling timeline behind, honey. Because Betty Lavette's video is just straight tea. So I'm gonna have to give it to y'all in just straight tea shots down a list. Let's get to it. This first rumor talks about how when Betty was messing with Willie Jones, the guy we just talked about, she ended up meeting a girl named Sherma Lavette. And Sherma Lavette told Betty about a guy named Timmy Shaw and said basically, Betty, if you could connect with Timmy Shaw, he could really get you into the music industry. Well, Betty borrowed Sherma's last name, Lavette, and she did go meet Timmy Shaw and she told him, hey, I heard you're the man with the connection. So Timmy was like, well, yeah, I could possibly hook you up with Johnny Mae Matthews, but I don't know. Baby said Betty put some magical stuff on him, and about a day later, this man was saying, yes, I could definitely take you to go see Johnny Mae Matthews. Now, the folks say that Johnny Mae met Betty, and she actually liked Betty. She liked the way Betty looked. She liked the way Betty sang. As a matter of fact, she recorded Betty. But Betty got a little too confident. That girl walked up to Johnny Mae Matthews one day and was like, okay, so now we done put the record out. When do you think I'm gonna get some money? Baby, them folks say that Johnny Mae picked that girl up by the neck, slammed her into the wall, grabbed her neck again, and brought her face close and was like, B, what money? That's my money. You ain't made no money yet. Said that Johnny Mae told her that she needed to take her behind on tour, sing her little songs, and maybe, just maybe, she'd see some kind of money. And that's what Betty did. And it was on this tour that she ran into our guy. Y'all know what guy I'm talking about. The first video that Betty Lavette was ever mentioned in, Mr. Otis Redding. And honey, the messy old Hollywood streets say that as soon as Otis Redding saw Betty Lavette, he was slung in the spirit of lust. He came on to Betty pretty hard and she told him, don't you got a wife or something back home? Baby say that Otis told her, I got a pregnant girlfriend back home, but I'm actually looking to make you my wife. The folks say that Betty was like, nuh-uh, I won't be your wife, but you could definitely have me for tonight. Baby say that Otis had her that night and the night after that. As a matter of fact, gossip claims that the whole time they were performing that show together on tour, Otis was possibly knocking it down every night. And when the tour was over, she sent Otis on his way. The next rumor says that Aretha Franklin's husband, Ted White, met Bettye LaVette after a show one day and he was fascinated with her. But she also got on his nerve. And that's because Betty was one of those brash, laughing all loud and talking loud in the restaurant type of girls. And so the story says that Ted White smooth walked up to her and basically whispered in her ear and was like, you know, your behavior is stupid. You know, you loud, you uncouth. I want to teach you how to be a young lady. That's what gentlemen prefer. Child, before Ted could even finish, Bettye LaVette had cussed that man out. Then next thing you know, baby, they say Betty was back at his place laying it down on him. Ted liked Betty's company so much that he would invite her back to his home with Aretha. Like any kickbacks they had or little parties or whatever, Betty would be there. And you know what Aretha would be doing when Bettye LaVette walked through the door? Hey, Betty girl, how you doing? Cha. The folks say that Aretha Franklin was too high on cocaine to notice or care what Bettye LaVette and Ted White were doing. In fact, gossip claims that Ted White, Bettye LaVette, and Aretha Franklin would do cocaine all together. The next rumor says Betty goes on tour with Solomon Burke. And I actually explained this story in detail on the Solomon Burke video, but I'm gonna tell parts of it here. The gossip claims Solomon Burke told her straight out, if you want to sing on my tour, on my show, you have to sleep with me and basically be my woman the whole way through the tour. And on one of the nights, maybe even the first night, Solomon calls Betty to his room. Says Solomon Burke was naked and squares up in the tub with the water almost overflowing. Solomon Burke tells Bettye LaVette to take off her clothes and come and sit on the side of the tub, and immediately says, Bettye LaVette, have you been in prayer? Have you given your life to the Lord? You really ought to join my church. Let me be your pastor so I can teach you and lead you. He continues preaching and talking, telling Betty how she needs to get right with God and stop playing with God's time and all this good stuff. Then, without missing a beat, baby, says, Amen, blessed Father. All right, Bettye LaVette, come on over to this bed and let me teach you the ways of man. He probably didn't say, let me teach you the ways of man thing, but he definitely did do all of this church talk in the tub and then tell Bettye LaVette to go get on the bed and open some stuff up. Close to the end of the tour, Bettye LaVette allegedly said that she got tired of making love to a big man. You know, she just didn't enjoy it. And so on this particular night, she made arrangements for another man, a sexy, smaller man, to come up to her bedroom and do things with her. So after the show is over, Bettye LaVette does not go to Solomon Burke's room. Well, I guess after he waits so long, he ends up going to her room. And so he knocks on the door, Bettye LaVette, you in there? She don't answer. Eventually, Solomon Burke gets upset, honey. And so he goes back to his own room and Bettye LaVette continues to enjoy the night with her small male lover. Well, the next morning, she wakes up trying to think up a lie to tell to Solomon Burke. But honey, what she don't know is that she ain't even got to worry about it, baby. Because Solomon Burke is gone. He has left Bettye LaVette stranded in this city. And what makes it even worse is that she has performed pretty much for this whole tour and Solomon Burke didn't even leave her no money behind. Like he never even paid her. Now, this next story is certainly gonna blow y'all hair back. Bettye LaVette was on a tour with James Brown. She had released her biggest song ever. This song was called Let Me Down Easy.
I know it's all over.
And baby, she was right. It really was over because James Brown had decided she getting too much applause. It's too much clapping out there. He was upset that she was getting too much applause, so he was shutting down her singing Let Me Down Easy. When Betty hears this, baby, she is 38 hot. So, you know, she's stomping around, you know, F James Brown. He ain't ish to me. I can't believe this mother effer. Folks telling her to keep it down. You know, James Brown might hear. I don't give a F if he hear. F him and his doggone little girlfriend that he got. She ain't nothing but a B2. Bettye LaVette's dressing room door burst open and James Brown's girlfriend came in like, what's up, B? What's up? Say that Bettye LaVette turned around to see who was talking to her crazy like that. Baby said it was TAMMIE TERELL, honey. Child, say that Bettye LaVette was finna rush up and give it to her. Say that TAMMIE TERELL lifted up her skirt and pulled a gun. Told Betty, I heard you was in here talking about me. Come on, Health, and I'ma blow your wig back. On and say that Betty saw that doggone gun and how crazy Tammy was looking and she changed up her tune real quick. She started saying, no, I wasn't talking about you. Girl, I don't even know who you is. Baby say Tammy Terrell told her, well, let me introduce myself. myself. I'm Tammy Terrell, and I can sing circles around you any day, B. Betty did not believe that at all, but she also was not crazy enough to argue with a gun. So basically, she was just like, you know, you got it. It's cool. Said Tammy just held the gun up for a minute, and then she finally put it up, and as she and Betty continued talking, they actually became friends after this. They were so cool that allegedly they called themselves groupie singers because they were professional singers, but they also were groupies. Baby, the folks say that Bobby Blue Bland was sitting up there telling my son, every place that I go, whoa, it seems so strange. Oh, and they say that Bobby could stop that little mess because the night that he was with Betty LaVette wasn't nothing strange but him. Now, the story alleges that Bobby Blue Bland was all hot and riled up, ready to give it to Betty LaVette. But then say he decided to snort some cocaine first because I'm guessing he was ready to stand up in it. Bobby snorted that stuff and laid down and went to sleep. But the folks say that Jackie Wilson and Betty LaVette had a similar experience. Now, the folks say that Jackie did not fall asleep. The problem with Jackie is that he just could not get stuff to ride. And baby, the folks say that he tried and tried. Child, that man was probably punching himself in the TT and everything, trying to get that thing to work. But it just would not work. So in the end, allegedly, he basically told Betty, like, can we just like kiss, cuddle, and rub? And she said yes. She was just excited to have Jackie Wilson in her home and in her bed. Now, the people that I've named so far, most of them were either one-night stands or friends with benefits, where they probably got the benefits about 3-4 times. That's it. But on top of these people, Betty LaVette also had long-lasting relationships or people that she messed with for long periods of time. And gossip claims that one of the main men that she loved was Motown producer Clarence Paul. And gossip claims that there may have been a reason that Betty LaVette fell so deeply in love with Clarence Paul. While most men at that time period were not really going below, Clarence was crunching, munching, and tongue hunching, baby. Woo! And along with this attribute, he also was always there for Betty LaVette. Now, Clarence Paul was said to be Stevie Wonder's mentor as well as a chaperone. And I'm guessing Stevie was 18 at the time of this episode. Clarence Paul deemed him now a man, and he wanted to set up something that would prove that Stevie Wonder was a man. So per gossip, Clarence Paul calls Betty LaVette, and he tells her Stevie is now an 18-year-old young man. You know what I'm saying? I want him to experience some things that he's never experienced before. So can you call one of your groupie homegirls? Allegedly, Betty LaVette says yes. She calls one of her homegirls. The homegirl agrees to it. Stevie shows up with Clarence Paul and some other people to Betty LaVette's house, and Stevie just is cheesing and smiling, honey, and somebody trying to take his hand and lead him down the stairs. Stevie gets so doggone excited, baby, he lets go of the hand that's holding him and tries to rush downstairs himself. Child, that boy busts himself all upside the head with a low-hanging ceiling. Because what are you doing, Stevie? You can't see, or can you? Anyway, to tell the rest of the story, Stevie does finally make it downstairs to the bedroom that's in the basement, sits on the side of the bed, and he's just waiting, honey. Well, after about an hour, this is Stevie. He was mad, baby, because turns out that woman didn't even never show up. Child, she went and saw another man over Stevie Wonder. Now, gossip claims another relationship that Betty LaVette was in was with singer Gene Chandler, the Duke of Earl. Gene had tried to get with Betty LaVette for years. Well, he finally got her, and I guess he changed up on her. Because allegedly, he thought he was player enough to have Betty LaVette in the bedroom and another woman in the living room. Child, them folks say that Betty LaVette saw that woman in the living room and cussed Gene Chandler out. I don't know what he was thinking. Now, the messy old Hollywood streets say that Betty LaVette also had relationships with about 3 or 4 pimps, but it was one pimp that she was head over heels for. And I'm just going to call this guy K. Story says Betty met K when she was around 19 years old, and this guy K allegedly showed her the world. You know, fancy restaurants, high quality wine, fancy clothes, things like that. So Betty fell deeply in love with this guy, and Kay recognized the signs that she was in love with him because, baby, the day that he figured it out was the day that he changed the game. Gossip claims that he and Betty, as well as one of his prostitutes, were sitting down at a dinner. The prostitute said to get up and start like carving up his meat, putting it in his mouth, putting macaroni and cheese in his mouth, feeding him basically. And so Betty, who is still very young, you know, and like I said before, she's brash and she's loud, she's like, what y'all doing? Y'all crazy, ain't it? This is some funny BS here. About 2.0 seconds later, Kay had slapped her behind down to the ground. From here, Betty's life just got worse. A few days later, Kay came up to her and told her, hey, you're gonna have to start bringing in money just like the rest of my women. And he put Betty on the stroll, and per gossip, she had to bring home like $100 a day. If she did not, she would get beat. Allegedly, she did this for maybe around 2 months before one day she came walking up to Kay and she told him, F you, I'm not doing this no more. I'm leaving. That pimp grabbed her up by the neck, slung her around everywhere, and he was several stories high, okay? Opened the balcony up and held her over the railing by her neck, saying that he was about to drop her. And for Betty, she was at a low point at her life. When you guys buy her book and read it, you will see for yourself. But she was at a very low point in her life. So she was like, you know, well, N-word, drop me. You know what I'm saying? If that's what it is, drop me. Luckily, she called his bluff and he ended up bringing her back in and dropping her on the floor. She ran and grabbed her clothes and she got away. Now, there are several more stories of Betty LaVette dealing with men, some famous, some not so famous. And allegedly, she has several stories dealing with women. But the one that I saw, the scandal, child. The scandal. Now, the folks say that Betty LaVette befriended this young lady who was extremely beautiful. This lady was just as free-spirited, if not more free-spirited than Betty. So, you know, it was nothing for them to start messing around with each other. Well, to get to the story, at a particular time, this young lady was living with a male cousin. And allegedly, anytime this lady brought company home, her male cousin was angry and upset. Didn't matter if it was men or women, but when she brought the men home, he would be extremely upset. You know what I'm saying? He's slamming cabinets. He got an attitude. So the friend calls Betty and she's like, you know, hey girl, I don't know what's going on with my cousin. He is really getting on my nerves. I think he's actually a homosexual. I think he's a gay man and he likes my man and he's jealous. She says something along the lines of, you know, before I hook him up with a guy, I want him to experience a female. So gossip claims that she asks Betty, hey girl, would you come over here and make it happen with him? And Betty told her, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. Honey say while Betty is in the bedroom going the distance with this guy, I imagine that he tosses her from off on top of him to make room for the new woman who has climbed on top of him. Betty looked to the side to see who the woman was. It was her friend, the guy's cousin, also going the distance with the guy. Now, if you'll excuse me, even though during this entire video, we have discussed some of the wild alleged stories or rumors and gossip regarding Betty LaVette's love life, I think she was married at least 2 times. And again, because this is a scandalous gossip and tea video, I did not have time to go into her actual story and why she could never achieve the fame that she so rightfully deserved. But again, y'all, if y'all will go get her book, like, it will really touch your heart, because it's like everybody was making her promises and lying to her. But anyway, this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous twisted lemon lime tea on Mrs. Betty LaVette. Please, please, please like the video. If you are new here, please subscribe. I will be back with another video very soon. Bye, y'all.